So we're going to talk about the Arduino IDE, the Arduino Integrated Design Environment. What you see on the screen in front of you is the Arduino Uno. That's the hardware that we run our program code on. Okay, the Arduino IDE is the actual application that we write our code in. And so we're going to use Arduino 1.6.10, and I'm going to run this video off of a Macintosh. It's a very, very similar functionality and look and feel on a Windows. So we're going to open up the IDE, and it may default to a blank code, or it may default to the last program code that you had in there. So a couple things to get oriented here. Before we start looking at this code, let's go up to Arduino and Preferences. And I want to make sure we have some preferences set for you all, so it's going to help us in visualizing our program more easily. Okay, so you can change the font size, bigger or smaller, right? I love displaying line numbers. That gives us these line numbers along the left side rather, so I can identify quickly and easily line 32, line 53, line 3. Okay. Enabling code folding allows us to shrink or expand chunks of code. And the last one, though, that I love, I do not select. So I deselect save when verifying or uploading. Really what that does, if it's selected, it will automatically save the file every time I upload a new version of the code to the hardware. That may sound great, it may sound really helpful, but when you're modifying code, you might try something and it might not work, and you want to go back to what you previously did that sort of worked, right? If it automatically saves for us, it's harder to do that, to go back to old versions. Okay, so I like to save manually. I can control what version I'm using, and I actually save very often new versions. Okay, so deselect save when verifying or uploading. Hit OK. And so now I have my program. I have my line numbers. I now have the ability to shrink chunks of the code, to declutter, right? And make it maybe seem a little easier to visualize. Every program in Arduino has a void setup that runs one time, and a void loop, which repetitively or continually runs. This is the part of the code, the void loop, where you have the majority of your code in, right? And that runs until we turn the power off to the board. Okay, so we're going to repeat our code again and again and again until we disconnect the power. So just pretend we have this bit of code that we've written. It's going to blink an LED on and off, and I want to actually get that onto the board. So I would verify first by clicking this check mark that the code is written correctly. Make sure all the syntax, all the ways of writing the functions are correct. There's no mistakes. If that is done compiling, basically it takes this code, words that we understand, and converts it to ones and zeros, which the computer chip understands. Then I can hit upload, the arrow, and I actually save that file to the board. So it now is residing on the board. And this is what it's going to look like. It's going to blink some status LEDs right here when it's uploading. And then it's going to blink on, off every second. That's my code running now. Okay. Now, we go back to the Arduino IDE. So we've just uploaded a file, right? We've verified it and then uploaded it. I could now save it. I could go do a save as, and save it in a location that I know about, okay, and a name that I remember, all right? We can also open from existing ones. We can open recent files. We can also open from the sketchbook, which is where all of the program codes get saved to. There's also many examples, okay, that this program will come with, and actually the blink example is the one we have in front of us. There's lots of other ones. There's other things called libraries, which are basic large chunks of code that somebody else has written that make our job easier. We'll use some of those, but we're not really going to get too deep into that. Also, we can edit our code. A big one here is commenting and uncommenting, and that comes into play if we want to have a chunk of code not run. Okay, so we could come in here and we could comment it out, meaning that is hidden from the hardware, and the hardware won't see that as part of the code. Okay, it might be that we don't want to run that part of the code while we're testing. Okay, then we could come in and toggle that comment, and now it will run. Okay, so these two double slashes in front of any line of code will make it a comment, meaning the hardware board doesn't interpret that as code. It only allows us to see something. Okay, which will have actual functions that we've written that the computer chip understands, and then we'll have comments that we as humans understand. Okay, and the better we get, the more we understand these functions without looking at the comments. We can also do the verify and upload the sketch here. There's some tools. A big important thing is to have the port selected as the Arduino Uno. Okay, on a Windows version, you'll have COM1, COM7. You want to make sure you've selected the COM port that is denoted by the Arduino board, and that should come up automatically, but we might have to select it. Okay, we also have an ability to have multiple different types of boards. We want the Uno. We're going to have a serial monitor, meaning we can send data to and from these boards dynamically. Okay, we can type in data here to send it. Okay, we can get data to be printed out. It's important that the baud rate or the baud rate is set properly. Okay, based on what our code program has, and we'll get into that more. We just need to be aware of that. Okay, we also have a serial plotter. Okay, similar concept, but instead of printing text and numbers, it's actually going to plot them. So it could plot a value of some variable. And so we also need to make sure the baud rate's selected properly. The baud rate is the speed at which we communicate from our computer to the board. Okay, so if you talk at the right speed, you understand each other. If somebody talks too fast, right, you can't understand them. Same concept. So that's the basics of the IDE. If we want additional resources, which could be very helpful as you program and as you work through some of the activities, under the Help tab, there is a great website page from the Arduino website called the reference page, which will go through and has every function and variable type and types of code that we can write for this Arduino board. And you could click on each one and it will give you a blurb on what it is and an example chunk of code on how to implement it. Okay, this could be very helpful for understanding how some of these functions work. Now, there's more than just the reference. There's also a troubleshooting page, okay, which could be very helpful as well. As we get through troubleshooting, there's going to be issues. Nothing's going to work perfectly, right? You're going to have your code written, and then it's going to be an error uploading, right? So you can come here and say, why can't my program upload to the Arduino board, right? Well, there's some possible issues here that you could read through. Okay, and if none of that makes sense, we can then still, myself or the other TAs will be there to help you. So that's the biggest parts of the IDE, kind of getting comfortable with where things are at, and getting comfortable with how to save the files, where to go to get files, where to go to get help. All right, so we'll get more in depth in class.